All right. Welcome to this episode of Monetizing Your Mental Capital. I'm your host, Will Christensen. I have Drew Hart here. And Drew, part of the reason we didn't ask you for a bio or anything like that is because I like to actually have you answer a question to open this up. And then we're actually going to touch on something we were talking about right before we started recording in terms of this entrepreneurial heart that, you just how you handle the world and bushwhacking through a career, as you said. But diving in here, Drew, my question is this. Tell me, if I were an e-commerce seller listening to this podcast, considering the idea of diversifying my portfolio into a service-based business or an info product or maybe a SaaS product, if I was considering monetizing non-tangible goods, why would I be interested in hearing from Drew Hart?
I'm not sure, like the way I kind of think about, see, each of these products kind of require like different things. But if we're talking about like the spirit of the entrepreneur, is that where you're going with that? Like this, like the spirit of the entrepreneur?
The spirit of the entrepreneur, your experience with service-based businesses or SaaS-based businesses, or just, building in general. What do you have to offer that you think maybe might be a unique perspective than others?
Yeah, sure. So I'll answer this, but I'm going to go roundabout to it. So my background, when I graduated college, I went into enterprise, right? So I graduated school, I went into enterprise. I spent 10 years there. Somewhere along year 6 or 5, I was like, this isn't feeling right, but I didn't have language for it, right? Like I didn't have, like, I'm going to share a bunch of language here in a second, but I didn't really know why I didn't like being told what to do. Part of me wanted to learn and hear from like other people that I considered to be like knowledgeable and experts, and they understood the industry and they had skills that I didn't know, like spreadsheeting, for instance, right? Things like this. I didn't understand like how to put messaging together and like speak corporate, and those things are all important. I really do think those are important, but I didn't really have language for it. And then like I wanted to go get my MBA, but it's because everybody else was doing it. But behind the scenes, like I was like, no, I want to do this. So I want to go network and I want to go meet other smart people and I'm going to go start my own business. I had no idea what it was going to be. I didn't know how to start a business. I mean, to me, it was just like an aspiration. And so that kind of started leading me down the path, which, by the way, do not get your MBA to go start a business. That's just like a big waste of time and money. Just go start a business. Like, go on YouTube for real.
So I'm scrolling through LinkedIn and I see Alex Hermosi come on, and I didn't actually hit the audio, but I'm reading his subtext, and he's like yelling at his computer. He was like, "You don't learn how to be an entrepreneur by listening to podcasts. Well, effing do it."
Yeah, you need one thing. It is a customer.
Yeah.
That is the only thing you need to worry about. And everyone's like, well, wait, no, but how will I do billing? You will send them an email. How will I ever accept payments? You will ask them to send a Venmo to you. Like, you will do like really simple stuff to figure all these things out. Go get a customer. That's the hard part.
The interesting thing about it is, and he continued, like, the way you're going to learn is by doing a lot of things wrong so that you can learn to do it right.
Totally.
Like, find mentors and find individuals who have some experience. They definitely can save you from some pain from what's there. But I think that the time you go find those mentors or the time you go listen to those podcasts is while you're slogging through it.
100%. Like, there's always little boundaries and nuances and details to everything we're talking about. It's like, don't be dumb, right? Like, but at the same time, like, don't go invest so much time in overthinking a plan or a process. Just go for it. Like, map it out, be a little bit thoughtful, and then get to it. Like even today, so Vinculum, like today, like we've got 20 people, we've got over 40 brands that we're managing. We got a lot of stuff going on. Even with the leadership team, we are adamant about the idea of rapid prototyping. We are really focused on be iterative. But at the scale that we're at, we can't be dumb, right? Like I can't just like say, okay, just go figure it out. And then we kind of blow up 4 or 5 client relationships. You can't do that. There's this balance. But when you're really just kind of first starting out, the one thing that because I do mentorship, like your clients are way more resilient to the problems that you think you're going to present to them, like their experience, the service quality, a delay on whatever it might be. They are way more resilient than you think they are. Like probably 3 to 5 times what you think they are, to put a number on it. In other words, like, from your vantage point as the entrepreneur, you're going to feel like I'm kind of really screwing this up. And your client's sort of just like, no, it's fine. But like, I'd like it if you just communicate with me. And they they stay with you. So even the worst case scenario is that, they're not dumping you. They're just like, no, there's a better way. And you learn from that.
That's interesting that you say it that way, because I think we underestimate the value of communication in a client service business. And I discovered this the hard way as I built my services-based business. So I'm currently in the process. I do this thing alongside Selling Labs where I clone entrepreneurs. I find entrepreneurial apprentices, young entrepreneurs, and I clone entrepreneurs. I help them extend their personal bandwidth. If they're the bottleneck, that's the solution that I have. In that process, it's a service, right? I'm monetizing the ability to make that match and getting paid to make sure the match continues. I was noticing that we were so backed up with a line of mentors, lots of people wanting apprentices or mentees, clones. Like, please give me a clone. Please give me a clone. I got like 3 people in line. And I was like, man, when you have an active client like that's waiting for something from you, every 2 business days, checking in and just being like, hey, just a heads up, still got you. Yep. Hey, just a heads up, I still got you.
Yeah, haven't forgotten about this. It's on my radar. I will follow up.
And now I found that it's also important to add value. So I like to vary the communication so that it's not something like just I got you, that gets repetitive, right?
Yeah, of course.
So in this situation, reaching out and saying, hey, we've interviewed 3 candidates. We really like the first one. They seem like they might be a good fit, but they've got 3 more tests that they've got to get through.
Yeah.
Or with Seller Labs, we automate data processes for agencies. And during that onboarding process, like being like, oh, did you know we download this sort of data and automate this sort of stuff? And just having like a repertoire of 15 random things inside the company that your customer might find interesting that you can use to keep the communication alive.
Yeah.
Like when you F up and it's going to take 2 weeks to fix it, well, tell them you're going to fix it and then check in every day for 2 weeks and be like, okay, now it's fixed. And if you have to reset expectations, reset the expectations.
Yeah. We just did this, right? So we have a client right now. So we offer we're an agency. We do full service Amazon, like everything under Amazon, literally anything that you would ask, like, do you do that for Amazon? I would say yes, right? So we had a client that doesn't want to use our stock seller operations services. They've already kind of solved parts of it.
Okay.
So, but I didn't know this. So they're like, hey, we want you guys to help manage more of our account. We're like, okay, cool. Here's a contract. Here's the services. Here's a slide deck. Let us know what questions you've got. Let's set up a meeting. Let's talk. And they're like, well, I don't really need all this. I was like, okay, what do you got? But they were anxious to get going. So we were like, okay, cool. I'll get back to you with a custom quote and we'll figure out what we can do. And it took me 9-10 days to do this. They're thinking maybe I'll get back to them in 3. And so as I'm and I got busy. And so then as I was responding, I'm late on just acknowledging the email. Like for my own standards, I'm late.
What are your standards?
Like same day, same day, next day. Yeah. I mean, if someone sent me a note this afternoon on a Friday, I mean, Monday, right? Next business day. But within 24 hours, 24 business hours.
I like to say 12 business hours, maybe even 8 business hours, right? Like if you sent it to me in the morning, 7 a.m., so I guess I'm saying more like 5 business hours, whatever day that is, 5 business hours goes by, I should be responding to you. Now, that's my own personal zeal of I'm going to respond to you within 5 business hours. So like you said, 4 p.m. on a Friday, it's going to be Monday.
Right. And I'll get back to you on Monday. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that's actually super acceptable. What I have found, where does the line get crossed? Where do you see clients getting pissed if you don't reply?
To be honest, I haven't done it. I really haven't. Because that's just I'm at that level where I'm not dropping the ball on those. I mean, I guess maybe it's happened. They're probably getting disappointed at a week, and they're probably like, I don't need to talk to you if you go 2, right? If you're getting past that day, business days, we're talking, you get past business day 5, 6, 7, their expectations start falling off pretty quickly. Yeah. 5 would be the maximum.
I found that it depends on the needle, the urgency needle, right? Let's imagine we got a customer bell in front of us. And actually, this is, no, we're going back here a little bit. I started my career as a salesperson, and I kind of bounced around between I sold newspaper advertising for the local newspaper and for the college newspaper, multiple college newspapers. And it was actually super fun because I'd put on my suit and tie and I went and walked into the pizza shop and I was like, hey, Mr. Pizza Shop owner, I have got the greatest deal for you. I'm going to get you access to these 2,000 college students that are right up the road. And he was like, okay, how much does that cost? And I remember being like, $100. There was nobody to train me. And he was like, eh. And I was like, I'm going to charge more. So
yeah, you're like $200.
how about $200? And I did. I raised the price over time. Really fantastic business like experience to just go figure something out. But I remember in that sales role, as I got up and I ended up at a regional newspaper. So like they were covering 380,000 people and like much or 380,000 subscriptions, much larger organization. Yeah. I remember hadn't really gotten used to this whole email situation. And I remember my sales manager sitting down with me like, okay, I need to imagine real quick that person that you just took 4 days to respond to an email to walked up to the customer counter here. Let's imagine that it's not via email. They walked up to the customer counter and they ring a bell and they're standing there. How long before they start to get impatient? Mm-hmm. I was like, I don't know, like 30 seconds to a minute. She's like, absolutely. 30 seconds to a minute. They're starting to get overwhelmed. What happens if you make them wait 5 minutes? Or at that point, I'm pissed, right? Like, I'm like, why is there a bell with no note that is making, and now, how long do you wait before you walk away and leave them a bad review? And I was like, I mean, at 5 minutes, I'm almost there. But like 10 minutes, and I've now rung the bell a couple of times, and I'm looking for a phone number. And like at that point, it's like, what? She's like, but why? Why are you so annoyed? And I stopped it, and I was thinking, like, I mean, I'm just this like really young sales guy. I had no real concept here of like what's there. And I said, I think it's because the bell on the counter is an expectation. She's like, is that written somewhere? And I was like, well, no, it's not written anywhere, but that's how it works.
Right.
So she's saying what you're seeing is a social construct. It's a law, right? Like it's an unwritten law that if I that bell within 30 seconds to a minute, somebody had better be walking out and answering my question. And
or at least saying like in the back, I'll be there in a minute.
Yeah, exactly. If the guy says I'll be there in a minute, how much longer will you let him go before you ring that bell again? I mean, if he's reset my expectation, maybe a full 5 minutes. Like and then I'm like, dude, where are you? Like you said a minute. I'm now at 3 or 4. Like where are we at here, right? So like she was trying to teach me about this social construct, and so I didn't realize it. But email has this unwritten rule of social construct, and so you said like 5 business days, and it's just plummeting. Totally agree. I think the louder they ring the bell, the faster you have to receive it, because there are different ways to ring that bell. Like when you get a client email, I mean, what do you think? No,
I totally agree with you. And like, I love it's not even an analogy. It's a real world experience. And I think we've all kind of had this experience. Like there's the ring the bell experience. I've got the ticket, for the meat counter. There is, I'm going to put you on hold and I'll be back, in a minute, right? Whatever that is. We've all kind of been there. And regardless of even the expectations, if my expectation was, and this is true for like cable companies, that I'm going to get on hold, they do it on the front end of the calls now. Like the more advanced call centers will say, hey, thanks for calling support, blah, 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 blah. Your expected wait time is, 57 minutes. You're like, hang up. I'm freaking not waiting 57 minutes. Yeah. And then I'll just call back later, which is a better experience than waiting.
I love the ones that will say, press 1 to get a call back in 57 minutes. And I'm like, oh yeah. No, I'm not even waiting. The worst offender of this, the worst offender is the IRS. It is a freaking joke, man. Like you call into the IRS, and honestly, that's a situation where I'm like, capitalism totally failed us here.
I feel like they're doing their job though, because like that's their identity, right? Like if they did actually provide good customer service, we'd be like, wait, what? I'm sorry, is this the IRS?
What I would say is, imagine if we somehow figured out how to get capitalism to create a competing branch. So now there's like 2 versions of the IRS that you could go to. Like, you could totally do this. Like the government could totally set this up. Like, there's 2 different branches, and whichever branch has the best customer service, that's when you go with, and they get paid more if they work. Like, can you imagine if we actually
battle royale? It's battle royale for government departments.
IRS is. I mean, you think about it. Competition does breed better customer service, right? Like I do see that out in the marketplace, but yeah, no, they're by far the worst offender, as I've decided. Like you ring that bell at the customer service desk over there, And you might as well go take a nap, man.
The other interesting nuance of this is like all that sounds great, but then like you have an upper limit, right, on what you can do. We go back to kind of like the starting your own business and like managing your own business. If you're DIY and you're one man person or one person show, or you're a small team, right? It doesn't really matter. I consider us to still be a very small team. I've got a bandwidth issue, and sometimes I get a flood of stuff, and I cannot meet my own standards. I just can't do it. But I can do things like, hey, I'm a little bit backlogged. I will get back to you this week, right?
Well, that week, own it that you're backlogged and turn on the autoresponder.
Right.
Like, hey, I want you to know, like, this is an autoresponder, and this is me telling you that this week there's some extenuating circumstances that have created a flow. So your expectation that I've set with you is 5 business hours.
I wouldn't do that, and I'll tell you why, or at least
tell me why.
I mean, that's not that I wouldn't do it. I don't know if I would do that just like as a general rule. And the reason I wouldn't is like I don't know who's going to email me, and I don't want necessarily every one of those conversations to have the optics that my bandwidth is cut off.
Ooh.
Right. So I might just piecemeal that to a handful of people.
So have like a canned response that you're ready to send.
Because I might have 20 people email me, and 18 of those people don't need to know that my bandwidth is maxed out this week, because that's unusual, right? And I wouldn't want them to think that it's usual when it's unusual. But those 2 people that, are really waiting for me for whatever reason, like those, I feel like I would want to let them know, like, hey, here's kind of like what's going on in the back end. And I'll get back to you, and this is the best I can do, and I'm so sorry, right? I don't want to do speed over quality, something like that. Like, I'm going to get you a really thorough response. I need time to do that, and you have to give me that time in order for me to get you a qualified reply.
What tools do you use when you're totally slammed like that? You know that you're not going to hit your own standards. What tools do you use to make sure? And I think part of the reason this conversation is so interesting, we haven't explored this yet on the podcast of a service-based business, and that's part of why we're digging in here. And so I think this is valuable, because an e-commerce business, when they send in a ticket about, hey, you sold me a whirly gig, and the whirly gig doesn't spin very well, right? Like there's something wrong with it. Well, in that situation, the social construct says a day, 2 days, 3 days, even a week. Like if you get a response in 2 weeks, sometimes I'm happy, because e-commerce companies are notorious for slow communication on product issues like that. Even if I'm like, this thing, my kid swallowed it, and they're generally a social construct that is slow. So this is very different in a services-based business where like you can't wait as long. It's been my experience.
Yeah, I mean, if we have a problem that like we have like values, like company values, I didn't develop them. The team developed them. They just kind of started to bubble up, and we kind of codified them. But the number one that we have is don't fuck the client. That is literally like I could show you a screenshot of like our company updates, and we review this, and the one is like, do not fuck the client. That means that if we've got a service problem, or they need a response, or they're looking for something, maybe they got a meeting with like a board investor or whatever it is, and they need data or information, that gets prioritized over other things that we're working on. My projects will get deprioritized because the client has a request that's higher. I mean, look, it's not that we're not perfect. I mean, no one's perfect, but our glitches are pretty nominal, and we always make sure that because like to your point, like if you got a product problem, you got to deal with that. Yeah. We would advise our clients who are selling products on Amazon that like, if a shopper buys one of your products and they've got a real issue with it, you have got to address that. Otherwise, you're going to have either leave a bad review or whatever.
I really enjoyed that part of the commerce side of things. The Google was kind of the one that started really giving handing the torch over to the consumer in terms of like, you've got some real power here, because they started making it possible for those public reviews to mean something, right? Like they started really prioritizing businesses that had more reviews. And you look at Google Maps right now, and it is very heavily weighted still on the review side. And there's people who are gaming that system and all of that, all of what's there. But in pushing into that, and then Amazon kind of leaning in on that as well, like the consumer has a lot of power in that situation. So I totally agree. Like the faster you can respond to that rung bell, the better the customer experience. And
100%.
Even an automated message, I actually appreciate, hey, this is an automated message. Just so you're aware, we've received the ticket. I like that message. And then 2, here's the expectation. You should be, you can expect a response within 72 hours.
I see what you're saying. So like your automated message that you were referring to, Will, is kind of like that customer support queue notification. That automated message says, hey, your wait time is 27 minutes. That makes sense to me. My comment was like, I would not have my own personal autoresponder say like, hey, by the way, I'm a little bit busy this week.
I like what you said about that, because you're right. That also makes me want to make a new app where I'm like, I want an AI assistant that sits in my email, and like every day I can pop in and be like, who are the people and how should you respond to them? And then I like tweak it. And so like when bandwidth goes insane, I'm like, which of these people are you going to send the autoresponder to? And it like knows like, oh, that's a client. They're a little anxious about their current stuff. So they don't, you don't want them to feel that your bandwidth is tight. Your bandwidth is tight because of them. Don't tell them that. You got to kind of meter what's coming out there.
That's funny, man, that you actually get the autoresponder to respond back to the people that are creating the bandwidth issue in the first place. And they're like, wait a minute.
So I'm curious, what tools do you use? Because I'm unaware of the AI autoresponder. I'm going to see if that domain's available still already. But I'm unaware of anything that has an AI autoresponder that can kind of keep track of your clients and create some sort of set some expectations around speed of reply. What tools do you use to rapidly process your inbox and stay on top of it when things go crazy?
Yeah, we use ClickUp like religiously, and then my true, like when I sit down and ClickUp's got features for this, and I'm toying around with them right now.
So real quick, just for some of these guys, they are not in this digital world, right? They're in the world of e-commerce, and they may have heard of ClickUp. I'm hoping they've heard of ClickUp because it's pretty big in the agency space. Everybody's heard of ClickUp because it's one of the top tools. What is ClickUp, and why would that be?
It's a project management software. It's becoming much more than that because they do like time tracking, but it's basically workload management, project management. You can build a lot of your like business processes. Like we build workflows around ClickUp's features. Like ClickUp gives you features to go design processes, and then you can put those processes into ClickUp and you can create them as workflows. And then you now have assignees, and then you can put comments in and around the work tasks that are in that workflow. So like, like we were doing because we're talking about Amazon. So if we were to go like refresh the images to make them better, right? We have a whole workflow for that, which is quite complicated. And there's a lot of stakeholders involved in that process. So we design the workflow, and then we program it into ClickUp, and then we can use ClickUp to manage not just the task, but the reporting and who's doing what and where it's at,
the relationships, even the communication, right? Like you can send email from inside ClickUp to somebody else, and then when they respond, it actually shows up as a comment inside ClickUp. It's got some pretty, like, think Zendesk, but actually with a project management system built onto it. It's got that level of capability.
It's fantastic. It really is fantastic. We do webinars on like how we use it and share content, because it's like, even though you may not have an agency, you will for sure like take a look at like how we structure ClickUp around our internal business processes, operating model. And it's like, you can totally use it. It's fantastic. It's cheap too. That's the part that kills me.
It's actually very, very affordable. So if you want a good listen, I actually ran a podcast called Automate, Delegate, Eliminate over at Data Automation. This is the first company that I started. And on that podcast, I actually had Zeb Evans, the founder of ClickUp, on the podcast. And it was so fascinating to hear him. It's like my 4th episode in my
I'm writing it down.
dataautomation.com/podcast. So dataautomation.com/podcast. There's 2 episodes there that I think are freaking amazing. There's one with, actually there's a couple. Chad Rubin's in there. There's some good names that you may recognize. Did one with Zeb Evans and did one with Wade Foster as well. Zapier. So basically them talking about their story as they get started on like what this looked like. I basically was like origin stories for entrepreneurs, like superhero origin stories. Super fun podcast. But hearing Zeb and how he like pushed into making ClickUp, like I was like, what do you develop that fast, dude? Like I don't understand. Right. Like your team seems to be able to push out more features faster than anybody else I've seen. And he said, well, you kind of have to be willing to break it. But so what? And he was like, oh yeah, we like push the envelope on like, let's get crap out there and let it break and fix it and move stuff forward. So like if you look at our cutting edge features, there's going to be some bugs in there that we're massaging out. And he said getting developers who are comfortable with that and creating a culture around that has actually been quite difficult. But now that we've got it, like we can move faster than most of the other SaaS companies.
They released, if your audience isn't familiar with ClickUp, but they just released 3.0. And this is like the last 6 months. So just released, but we've been using it for years. Prior to that, ClickUp was slow and clunky, and it would be like, you don't know when or where, but it was super valuable. Like I basically would be like, hey, you're not as fast today as you were yesterday. And so I'm like, oh, come on. Now that they, like, to your point, like he is making, or that company is making a lot of like rapid changes, and now they're becoming like true. Like when they release, it's very limited in any bugs or issues.
Oh, cool. So
I'm super happy with it.
They've even gotten better at that over time.
And I'm a software guy by background. Like I'm not an agency guy. I'm actually a SaaS guy.
I love it. I love it. So Drew, what other tools? So you mentioned ClickUp as a productivity tool. What other tools do you use to help you manage this rapid communication when you're overloaded?
When I'm overloaded, everything goes up. I do paper. So I'll sit down in the day and like I'll use ClickUp to kind of like structure and set. And then I put a piece of paper on my desk that literally duplicates what I've got in ClickUp. And then I just make sure that I'm looking at that because I can get pulled away. Kids, calls, meetings, whatever. And I may not actually just go back to ClickUp to go do those things. And I can do fun stuff like circle shit, underscore it, use different colors, whatever, all old school. But for the most part, it's still ClickUp. Like all of the dashboard, like sort of like, where do I need to be spending my time this week? It's all ClickUp. Where do I spend my time today? ClickUp. But when I get overloaded, I shift things down into a piece of paper. Like these are the 3 things I have to get done today.
So do you have any like structures that you use on a piece of paper to help you? So by the way, I actually have found as well, if my to-do list ends up on a computer in ClickUp and that's the only place that is, I am so freaking good at getting stuck in a rabbit hole, especially with stuff that I don't really want to do, but I kind of need to do. I'm really good at like just getting totally sucked in. So I do the paper thing as well. When you do the paper thing, do you have any sort of structure that you like ways that you put it out there?
No, I'll maybe create like, cause I use half sheets. I mean, this is literally my to-do list, right? I might create like a little box or something for like, this is generally like secondary, like, but they're personal items or something like I got to like pay my credit card or send a thank you note to a teacher. Yeah. And then other than that, I use strike throughs. I've got like a couple of symbols I use. I use a star and a key symbol, just like a circle with like, it looks like a key, like an old school key. Okay. Those are like from when I developed those, like when I was in university or college, but they're really just codes for me that just say like, this is like kind of info or context, or it's star. It's like really important. You got to go do it. But I don't even need that shit. Honestly, I can just look at it. Like I know of these 5 things I'm looking at right now, which one I need to work on.
Yeah. So for those of you that are listening to the podcast, you'll probably want to shift over and look at, I'm about to just draw real fast on a sticky note. I love this tool. It's called Miro. I'm showing you on Miro what a sticky note would look like. And I'm just going to show you the way that I figured out how to do some basic stuff. This is mostly from Getting Things Done by David Allen. But basically I do a box like this. So for those of you that are listening, I basically section the sticky note into 4 quadrants, but I make it so the top quadrant is actually kind of shared. So I usually write something like ASAP right here, or, do this now or something like that. And basically that gives me about 10 spots that I can put something into. And I'm usually really good. Like I write up here, I'm like fitting everything I can into my ASAP quadrant, like get this crap done. And then I go down here and I actually write 1 week right here. And then I write 2 weeks. So in Getting Things Done land, they call this a tickler file, where you put things that like can be put off for 1 to 2 weeks. And this part, they want you to do it by context. And so I only put things here that are like mission critical that I can actually get done from my computer, right? So that I'm getting it there. And I found that a sticky note gives me just enough room to write small and actually get there. That's how I write it down. And if I've done that, Like at the end of the day, I can look down at that and be like, yep, nothing on my ASAP card I got to do. So I'm done with work today. So that's how I.
Yeah, and it's Friday. We were just talking about cutting out early. So is your ASAP list done for today?
My ASAP list is looking pretty good. I'm not completely done. And if I do a half sheet of paper, sometimes I'll cheat and I'll actually take my full sheet right here and I just draw a line down the middle and I do my ASAP quadrant down the bottom.
I'll do something similar like that too, Will. Like, I just use the sheet depending on what my needs are, but most of the time it's just a list. And then, the top stuff goes to the top. But once I might start out the day with like 5 things on it. By the end of the day, there's a total of 10. Some of them get scratched off and they may not be sequenced. I'm not like going and redo. It's paper. I'm not going to go redo it to kind of like reorganize all that stuff. But yeah.
I find that the paper allows me to avoid sucking in stuff that happens with the rest of the computer, the other rabbit holes that you go down. What other tools? When you get overwhelmed, what other tools do you use?
Honestly, it's pretty much those two. And the reason is because I don't want it everywhere. Like I don't want to manage a lot. I really want to try and manage low. But the other thing that we do is a block time off. So we do it in 2 ways because we're geographically, we've got our team members are everywhere. Okay. So folks that are in the United States or in the, kind of the Western Hemisphere time zones, they have availability that's just open on their calendar. For me, I put a calendar event out there that's free internally. Like you could book a meeting and it wouldn't show as me busy, but it says I'm heads down, do not book time. And I do that for 3 or 4 hours each day. So I can get my own work done. Then I wire it up to Calendly, right? My calendar. Calendly will let outside people book time there. So I can leave time to talk with clients or partners or, whoever it is that I want to talk to externally, like you. But then the team knows that they can't book that time. So I'm always prioritizing client first, right?
Yeah.
But then I still make sure I leave myself enough room to get my stuff done. And then I make myself available for half the week for the team.
Yeah, I love it. That's some really solid time blocking. In terms of...
It's got to be a lot, by the way. I have tried doing like hour here, hour there. And what I find is that like my meetings creep over or I like, I'm going to take a break now. And, because I can, and then I just don't do it. But if I have at least 2 or 3 hours as a big block,
then you still can take a break and then get back into it.
Yeah. And I'll use 30 minutes of my own personal time in that 3-hour blocks. It doesn't actually end up being 3 hours.
Yeah.
And then the rest of it actually is heads down time.
Yeah. I find that it takes me 30 minutes to get into heads down time.
Right? Exactly.
It takes me that much time to rev up into it. Another tool that I really like, I'm just going to toss out a couple of them. Reclaim.ai is actually really cool from the standpoint of helping you manage your calendar and like dynamic time blocks and that kind of thing. It's a new tool that I've been exploring and testing out.
I like it though, because I've looked into it and some of these things I'm just like, it seems like a lot of management at the end of the day, I look at my week as basically like 10 blocks of time. I got a front end of the day and a back end of the day. That's just how I conceptualize it. That gets broken down into 30-minute meetings and 1-hour meetings and, my own time and everything. But like, I don't know how much it's going to help me. How has that experiment been going?
So we're in the middle of implementing it, and I've got a couple of meetings where I've actually had partners who have shared their read-only calendars with me so that when something gets booked over the top of it, it can like dynamically move the appointments around. And I'm not getting the full-fledged force of it yet. So I can't like fully recommend, like I would absolutely say Reclaim is the best ever. I am planning to get a full-fledged like 80 to 90% of my calendar managed through Reclaim because I have a virtual assistant who helps me manage all of my calendar blocks. And she spends a solid 10 hours a week rearranging things and moving podcasts and all that sort of stuff. And so I would love to get that 10 hours of her time put on something else if I could get Reclaim to do it. So I am planning to test that. I will get back to you on exactly how it goes. But I can tell you that the most sophisticated booking app that I've used, think Calendly, but times by 2, SavvyCal, SAVVY Cal. That sucker, it'll actually allow you to dynamically. So you mentioned those blocks in the afternoon.
I just put that on my piece of paper, by the way.
Hey, exactly. That's how you do it. So SavvyCal will let you put a block on the calendar and you can say client booking time. And then you can move that event wherever you want and it will follow you essentially. So you can say this event type can only be booked when an event on the calendar is called client time. So you can actually dynamically change. Like, so today, if I was like, I do not want to meet with any clients, you can delete it or rename it to be private time and then nobody can book it. right? So like it basically takes the control of that calendar block. Like you could log into Calendly and do the same thing, but like wipe it out and make it so that nobody can book you today. But I love it because I don't have to go backwards and go log into SavvyCal to change those blocks. So you can be like, you can create a like all hell's broken loose link, and it's like a I must meet with them today link. If I send you that link, it will look like my calendar is the most open thing on the block. The reason is because it's going to allow you to schedule over the top of like 7 or 8 different recurring meetings, a couple of different personal times, because I know that what you just called me about is mission critical. Like my taxes are due the next day kind of link. And when it gets scheduled over the top of, my assistant jumps in and reschedules whatever.
Dude, I love this. I have a hack for this with Calendly right now. I basically have 2 links that are identical, but one. So right now, like Calendly, like I use the wiggle room before and after a meeting. Right. Like it's only 1 hour in a day,
15-minute segments in between. Right. Yeah.
And so I have one that doesn't have that and one that does. Right. One with a buffer and one without the buffer. That's how I hack this. But this sounds way better. That's why I said Calendly times by 2. It's Calendly. Like this basically gives you some really finite controls. They do not have a free trial, which I was like, really? But it's not that expensive. It's like $12 a month. They got a free plan. I don't know if it's got all the features. I haven't studied this yet, but they got a free plan. Well,
maybe they've shifted it. When I bought it, they didn't have a free plan. They had not yet figured out how to create a free plan. But that's an example of how I use the Calendly link. When crap hits the fan, my assistant knows. Like, and I have this other thing where I jump on and I'm the head of sponsorships for this little fractionals community. And I get 10 people or 5 people a week who want to meet with me for 15 minutes just to talk about sponsorships. Well, I made it so that you could only book 5 of those a week. And so I'm booked out like through mid-July right now for that thing. And so anybody that comes in, that's how they've got to get through, is to connect those different dots.
So like for me, like partnerships are a big thing. I mean, I want to limit like 2 partnerships per week, no matter what.
Exactly.
And so you can set a rule up for that.
Exactly. So you could have a link that was specific to partnerships. And you would say, I want only 2 of these a week. I want it to be this long, and I want to be there this much of a buffer between the 2. So you would never have 2 partnerships in the same day, and it would always be 2 a week. And you would just tell the partner, hey, we're ways out on partnerships, but go ahead and use this link to book me. Yeah. And you can move it all around.
I love it. So we do audits, right?
Yep.
We do partnerships. We do sales calls. We do just like co-marketing calls, just like, hey, you want to work on a case study or whatever. Each of these kind of like, to your point, like they have different priorities. And so they have different rules. Like they have different desired rules. I wouldn't say that they have rules because that Calendly doesn't have this.
SavvyCal, I probably should get some sort of affiliate link for these guys. But the last thing that sold me, the thing that was like, oh crap, you got to get that. They have a thing where you can give it ranked priority levels. So you can create what are called availabilities, and you give them the first availability, and then it pops up after about 45 seconds. If somebody's hovering over and they don't see something, it pops up and says, didn't see a time you like, click here to open up more times. And you can give them a secondary, like, okay, first I want you to try to book here, then click this link and it opens up. And you can do that as many times as you want. So you can have like 5 different levels. So if somebody wants to game the system, they could just sit there and wait and click show more, and then they'd have access to all of it. But you can also kind of massage that.
I do this already. Like, this is what I do because I get busy. I'm like, it's even for clients or prospective clients. Like, hey, here's the link. They maybe live in Europe, maybe they live in Asia, maybe they live in the United States. Here's the link, book a time. And by the way, I know my schedule. I'm like, oh shit. I'm going to be able to schedule. So maybe they'll find a time because I'm not double checking it. I'm going that fast. Here's the link, book a time. And if it's next week, that's great. If it's the next week, fine. But if you don't want to, if this is urgent, and so I write it in my note, but this is urgent, let me know and I'll send you some custom times and move some things around.
Yeah. So what you would say,
you're telling me though, is I can automate all that.
Yeah. So what you would do is you can send them the link where every 45 seconds it gives them more time, right? So it would open up more blocks. Or you would create a separate link that was your ASAP link that allows them to schedule over the top of something other things. And so you would say, if those times don't work, you can click here and go to my urgent time blocks. And I actually tell people like, or you can click here, which will allow you to schedule over the top of something else that I'll have to reschedule. If it's that urgent, feel free to use that link.
Totally. That makes sense. I love it.
So SavvyCal is one that I use a lot. Just 2 or 3 more tools I want to mention that I just freaking love. Superhuman is probably the coolest email client I've ever seen. they build AI into it. And so if you ask it to write an email for you, it's actually read all of your email and it sounds like you. So instead of sounding like, oh, they probably got ChatGPT to respond to this email, it sounds like you because it's read all of your email. So Superhuman is one that I love a lot. And I've been really impressed with both their desktop app and their other app. Like you can stay on your keyboard and just rapidly process. Like if you write the word tomorrow, it actually opens up your calendar on the right-hand side so you can scan your calendar and you can be like, no, write Thursday. And
it's $30 a month though.
Opens up Thursday. It is. It's not cheap. But that one, Superhuman, helps me process email a lot faster. And I've actually been trying, like my assistant will still use G Suite. And I'm like, no, go use. And you can use both, right? So you still can use G Suite alongside it. But I love Superhuman. It's a little better for email processing.
Cool. What else? SavvyCal, Superhuman. What else?
SavvyCal, Superhuman.
I'm taking notes, by the way. I'm like,
no, I love it. The last one I would tell you, and this one just saves me a couple of probably 10, 15 minutes a day, is a Clipboard manager. So if you're not using a Clipboard manager yet, on Windows, I like ClipClip. On Mac, I think there's one called CopyClip. But if you just search in the iTunes store for Clipboard History Manager, if you use Alfred on a Mac, that's actually got a Clipboard Manager built into it. But Clipboard managers are freaking awesome because you can copy like 5 or 6 things on the same page and then jump over to the email and paste all 5 or 6 of those things without having to flip back and forth between the 2 tabs. So Clipboard managers are another hack that I love using. Yeah,
that's interesting for internal reasons. That's cool. Okay, cool.
Yeah, those are 2 tools I would definitely recommend we dig into. Drew, You've got me on the tool run here. And I think we'll finish out the episode talking about tools. We're going to have you on another time on this episode because there's 4 or 5 questions that I ask to every entrepreneur that I haven't asked you. So stand by. We're going to have you on again. So don't be surprised when my assistant reaches out and schedules you again.
Oh, that sounds great.
Holy crap. Okay. I can't believe I didn't tell you about this one. Okay. Tool hack of the year. So you guys just heard
bonus
me say.
Tool. This is your bonus tool.
This is my bonus tool. So the bonus tool I would give you guys is called Fathom. And Fathom Note Taker is the name of this guy. And Drew's probably been like, wait a minute, he's been in here the whole time. There's a thing called Will's Fathom Note Taker. And hilariously, I'm part of a nonprofit organization. My sister is in the nonprofit and they use my Zoom room a lot just for different things. I like lend it out to them in the evenings to use my Zoom room. Well, Fathom Note Taker goes and joins all of these meetings. And she said the other day, she said, everybody in the nonprofit thinks you're so weird because you have that phantom note taker. And I was like, oh my gosh, phantom is totally what you could call that. It is not called phantom. It is called Fathom. Fathom Note Taker. The reason I think this thing's amazing, I just told Drew, hey, Drew, I will reach out to you and schedule another time for us to get on a phone call. Well, Fathom Note Taker, what it's doing in the background right now is it's transcribing this entire conversation. And it's also going to put it in a very tight-knit, easy to see summary of everything that went on. And here's where it gets really cool. For $12 a month, you can pay to have their AI extract to-dos from the phone call. So my assistant goes in every day and she clicks a button inside their UI. And someday I'm sure they'll automate it to the point where I don't have to click a button. But she clicks a button and it extracts the to-dos. And I found that if I clearly state, I will do X, Y, and Z after this phone call for you, Drew. If I'm very clear with my communication, the thing doesn't miss. It also gives me a little pop-up window on the right-hand side of my screen while I'm on a call. And I can click on that pop-up window and even type in a task if I want, and it will bookmark the part of the call when that happened. So not only can my assistant go in and find the to-dos, but she can also skip to the part of the call where the to-do was and listen to what was going on. So if the AI hallucinates in some way, she can be like, oh, he was just kidding. He didn't actually mean that he wanted me to do something there. And so it's almost like I have an assistant on every single one of my phone calls, listening to every word I say, because at the end of the phone call, my actual assistant can go in and click that extract to-dos, and that hooks up to Zapier. So she pushes that all into ClickUp and processes those and throws out any that don't make sense and does the whole thing. And the other thing that I love about Fathom Note Taker, if I were to go and click the button right now and say end recording, the link to share with you, Drew, and I'll send you the recording. The link to send to you is right there available to kind of connect those dots. So
yeah, awesome.
Drew, it has been a total pleasure to be on with you. We've talked about a bunch of different time hacks. We've talked about, making sure that you're putting your arms around this idea of responding to people. I think that's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, man. Real pleasure. I look forward to doing it again. Yeah.
Okay. We'll have you on in a couple weeks and we'll get to some of those questions. I'm sure some people are listening to the episode like, wait a minute, Will, you forgot to ask those questions. So we are going to do another one with you and looking forward to it.
Cool. Sounds great, Will. Have a great weekend.
Have a good one, Dave. Drew, have a good one.